back to week number 4 of That Football Show with those fantasy guys.
And we are those fantasy guys.
It is week number 4 in the NFL this week, and we have big things coming up. We have the panic button this week, and in one of my leagues, I'm pressing it. How about you?
This past week was a great week of football. I think it clearly established earlier in the year than I've ever seen that we are looking at Seattle versus Denver in the Super Bowl. If anything else happens, it's a long season, anything can happen, but I've never seen two more clear-cut favorites at this early a stage as I did right now. I mean, that doesn't disregard a great game by the Bengals beating the Packers. They're up by 14 points and they're down by 16 points, and then they come back on a 4th and 1. They stuff it, return for a touchdown. Unbelievable ending to the game. And then the Colts come out. You really thought that the 49ers had a point to prove after what happened the week before in Seattle. And the Colts make the trade for Trent Richardson. They drive right down the field on the first drive of the game. They give him his first carry touchdown, and they never looked back. And I think those two teams really established themselves as clear-cut runners-up to the Broncos for the AFC.
Absolutely. And who saw the Indianapolis Colts playing power football against the 49ers last week? That was a surprise. They really took it to them and won in the ditches, as they say.
I thought it was the trenches.
The trenches. That's what it was. I knew that's almost what they say. What they really say is the trenches. And by the way, Tom Brady's stock is on the rise already after, of course, I told you to buy low. Let's move right into the show, and these key injuries on the screen. We got Terrell Pryor, Darrell Richardson, C.J. Spiller, Chris Ivory, Vincent Jackson, Andre Johnson, Jermichael Finley, and Julius Thomas. Jay, what do you have on those injuries?
I think the really interesting one to monitor is Le'Veon Bell because he's on the injury list, but he's not on the injury list for being hurt. He's on the injury list for coming off. Mm-hmm. I think he's right now listed as a co-starter with Felix Jones in Pittsburgh. Now, mind you, Pittsburgh isn't very good right now, but maybe establishing the run is going to let everything else fall in place. Pittsburgh has established the run since 1974, and they're not able to do it with the mash unit of running backs that they have. Le'Veon Bell might be able to come back, establish that running game, and that will allow Antonio Brown, Ben Roethlisberger to flourish a little bit more. But most importantly, Le'Veon Bell is a back that has so much upside right now. And the other one that you mentioned is Darrell Richardson being on the IR, or on the injury report anyways. That's somebody you've been talking about for a few weeks now, right. But that makes the stock to watch is Isaiah Pead.
Absolutely, yeah, because we were talking about Richardson just trying to hold off Isaiah Pead. If Richardson's hurt, Isaiah Pead becomes that 25 touch back, and obviously his value will skyrocket.
Absolutely.
Let's move on to the Hunt for Red October. Graphic is on the screen. Jay, can you explain to our viewers, because this is week 1 of the Hunt for Red October, what this segment's all about?
Well, in the NFL, there are bye weeks. There are weeks that you have to deal with. You have somebody like, I don't know, what's a good example? Let's say I drafted Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
And he's my starting quarterback.
Right.
And under no circumstances, Paul Roy, am I going to bench Aaron Rodgers.
Unless he's on a bye week.
Unless he's on a bye week. At that point, I have no choice to go out and look for the ultimate sub.
All right, and this week, now this doesn't happen often, but all 3 correspondents on the show had the same guy, Alex Smith. So we are going to give you Alex Smith as the ultimate sub this week. Alex Smith is owned in just 61% of leagues. He is 64 for 105, 669 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, and that 62% completion rating. Jay, and who's coming to town? Tell us why he's the ultimate sub of the show.
They are playing the New York Giants. And let me give you a couple of numbers on Alex Smith. You already went over them, but let's see. His attempts per week are 34, 36, and 35. And what do we always talk about fantasy football being the most important thing?
Opportunity is the most important thing in fantasy football. If your guys are getting the ball in their hands, they have the opportunity to put up fantasy points for your team.
So a quarterback that's throwing the ball that much, just like Andy Reid has done for a decade, he's going to have the opportunity to make plays, and he's making good decisions with those plays. His completions are 21, 22, and 21, 21, and 22 in 3 weeks. So that's over 60%. 62% rate. So he's making the most of his opportunities. He's getting the opportunities. And who's coming to town? The New York Giants defense. And I've thrown out a few numbers at you. Let me throw out 3 more. 36 41, and 38. Do you know what that is?
Is that the points that the New York Giants have allowed in 3 weeks of football?
That is the points, and that is redonkulous. So if you have Aaron Rodgers and you get to put in a quarterback that A is going to get the opportunity to throw the ball, that B is using those opportunities to complete passes and move the ball down the field and put his team in a position to score, and C going against a team that is doing nothing but giving up scores, that is the ultimate sub.
Absolutely, and the Giants' offense is giving up the ball. The defense can't stop anybody. They are just in complete free fall right now, and if they had a panic button, they'd be hitting it in New York.
I could not agree more. Sorry to jump all over you there, but if you have another guy to look at, maybe is if you have Randall Cobb, Jordy Nelson. After last week, he's going to have a 10-day break. He might have had a mild explosion. He might be able to build off of that. Donnie Avery might be a wide receiver sub.
Donnie Avery, Chiefs defense. I mean, start your Chiefs this week because the New York Giants are coming to town and the fantasy points are going to flow. Let's move on to Tough Sit.
Sit down, Waldo.
Jay, you want to give us a tough example of Tough Sit?
I will. Last week, we did this show. During the process of us recording this show, there was a pretty big trade. I'm not sure if anybody heard about Trent Richardson getting traded. So I'm not sure if that would have affected my Tough Sit if I had known that happened before I called it, but I do guarantee you this. One way or the other, I called Andrew Luck as my Tough Sit last week. Going cross country, playing San Francisco in that vaunted defense. Andrew Luck was 18 for 27, 164 yards, and did not throw a touchdown. So I feel pretty good that was a pretty good call and a Tough Sit. But again, that was an incredible game. That was a statement game for the Colts.
Absolutely.
And I only think I was on the phone with my brother after that trade happened, and I was like, I love it. I have Andrew Luck in a fantasy keeper league. Trent Richardson is only going to increase his value so much more. He's going to see 8 in the box in a little bit now. I mean, this has fantasy ramifications for the next 5 years as long as Trent Richardson's healthy. Anyways, Andrew Luck was my call last week. I hope you listened to me because that was a Tough Sit.
Trent Richardson going to the Indianapolis Colts is good for Trent Richardson. It's good for the Indianapolis Colts. It's good for the Indianapolis Colts fans. It's good for Andrew Luck. And it's good for T.Y. Hilton. Last week, when we were taping, we were telling you that we tape the show on Wednesday, and it's usually not ready until Friday. But we really wanted to take the Thursday night game as our Tough Sits, and Nostradamus even told us about what was going to happen on Thursday night. And what we said was if there was a week to sit down the Philadelphia Eagles' big three, it was week number 3 in the NFL and Andy Reid's homecoming. Now, if we had taken that as our Tough Sit, we would have looked like geniuses for the most part, which I will get to. Michael Vick was 13 for 30 for 201 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. Would have been a great sit. Deshaun Jackson was 32 for 3 receptions for 62 yards and 0 touchdowns. That would have been a great sit. Now, in full disclosure, we told you to sit down the big 3, or we would have told you to sit down the big 3. LaShawn McCoy had a great game. LaShawn McCoy ended up 20 for 158 and 1 touchdown. That wasn't a great sit, but 2 out of 3 ain't bad in the words of Meatloaf. What do you got to say about that Philly game? And I'm sure we'll get back to it when we get to Nostradamus.
We will get back to that, but that was it was a tough sit because college coach not being able to pad his schedule with a bunch of patsies on a short week, installing a brand new offense. I mean, I think we were all over it. It's just, Shady McCoy's a little shady.
He is a darn good running back.
Yes, he is.
Let's move on to who you had last week for your Tough Sit.
Well, we already covered that. I had Andrew Luck. This week
you.
I'm going with Andre Johnson. Andre, I think he was overvalued coming into the year. I saw him well inside the top 10, 7, 8, 9, around there. He's never really produced at that level. He's a stud NFL player, but I don't think he's ever had double digits and fantasy touchdowns. And this week, the Texans last week looked a little rough. I mean, they were kind of controlling the game for a little while. Then one thing happened, another thing happened. The next thing you know, they were so far behind they couldn't do anything. Andre Johnson bruised his shin. He got an MRI on his shin. I'm not just liking where they're going with the Texans. I'm going with Andre Johnson as my Tough Sit. I'd actually rather start, this year he's 20 catches for 222 yards in 3 games, which isn't bad, but he doesn't have any touchdowns. I'd rather start Denarius Moore, who might have had a little bit of a coming out party on Monday night. I'd rather start Marlon Brown, who might have had a little bit of a coming out party a couple of Monday nights ago. I'd rather start Golden Tate at Houston, just because the way that Seattle offense is playing. I mean, I said my sneaky start last week was Doug Baldwin. He only had one catch for 35 yards and a touchdown. This week, I'd rather play Golden Tate. You know what I'm saying? So I'd take anybody on Seattle. But Andre Johnson's my tough sit this week. And I think as the weeks go on, one of two things is going to happen. He's either going to feed towards a flex position, or he's going to start producing numbers. He's not going to stay as mediocre as he is right now.
I agree with that. My tough sit this week is C.J. Spiller. C.J. Spiller has been terrible through the first 3 weeks of the season. So I know what you're going to ask me. What are you going to ask me?
Why is C.J. Spiller a tough sit?
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I'm going to tell you why. It's because you drafted C.J. Spiller to be that every week guy, to be the hammer in your lineup, to give you fantasy points week in and week out, and he's not doing it. He is awful this season. He is 43 attempts for 153 yards, 0 touchdowns, and a fumble. I mean, seriously, in week 1, he was good for negative points. I mean, he's just been awful, and it's not all C.J. Spiller's fault. Some of it is the fact that they have a rookie quarterback, and teams are choosing to allow the rookie or to challenge the rookie to beat him down the field. And they're putting 8, 9 in the box, and Spiller's got nowhere to go. That being said, Fred Jackson, who's the backup for the Buffalo Bills, has been doing quite a bit more with his opportunities, looking at the same 7, 8 in the box. So if you're a C.J. Spiller owner and you don't own Fred Jackson, get out on the wire, get a trade going, get Fred Jackson on your team, because now C.J. Spiller is a little banged up. They say he's going to play. I'm sure he will, but it doesn't matter. Fred Jackson's the more productive back. So sit C.J. Spiller this week.
I have a question for you on that. Like, if I was a player and I didn't have either C.J. Spiller or Fred Jackson, but I needed running back help, which one would you think moving forward would provide more value?
I think that if the Buffalo Bills can get E.J. Manuel going and they can really expose some secondaries as the season progresses, then Spiller will have more value than Fred Jackson. But if you're looking at 7, 8 in the box, they proved it through 3 weeks. Fred Jackson is the man. He's a sledgehammer on that offense, and Spiller's more of a dancer, and he's just not getting it done. I'll tell you this. I've got C.J. Spiller and Fred Jackson on my team, and if nothing changes, if all things remain the same between now and Sunday, I'm starting Fred Jackson over C.J. Spiller this weekend.
That makes it a tough sit and a man that stands by his calls. Paul Roy's got a tough sit this week. He took a look at the Cleveland Browns rallying the troops, coming together. I don't think anybody in the world saw them beating the not all that good Minnesota Vikings. Brian Hoyer at quarterback.
3 touchdowns for Brian
Hoyer.
No
Trent Richardson. I mean, who saw that coming? And they go out there and they put up points. And Paul is kind of riding that train, saying that he thinks Joe Hayden is going to be able to shut down A.J. Green.
That's a tough sit.
You are on notice, and we'll be watching to see the results of that tough sit.
That certainly is a tough sit. It's time for Put Up or Shut Up. Jay, what do we got this week?
I am unbelievably frustrated. Yes, we pumped the tires of a David Wilson earlier this year.
Certainly did.
I drafted Hakeem Nicks. I know people that kept Victor Cruz or drafted him in the first round. The Giants' offense is awful. The Giants' defense is awful. I have a question for you and for the masses. What is worse? Scoring 0 points against the Carolina Panthers or giving up 38 points to the Carolina Panthers?
Well, I'll tell you what, the Giants defense made 2 average wide receivers in Brandon LaFell and Ted Ginn look like superstars last week. That's pretty bad. Equally as bad is Eli Manning and 3 running backs, 3 wide receivers, and a tight end can't get not so much a touchdown. They can't even get the ball moving down the field in that direction. They made the Carolina defense look like the '85 Bears. I don't know which one's worse, but they're both pretty bad.
And that being said, New York Giants, you are on notice. Put up or shut up.
You see it on the screen. Wall Street, buy low, sell high. Jay, who do you got for us this week?
Well, I kind of went out with a couple of different ideas. I was thinking maybe Ryan Broyles, with Nate Burleson breaking his arm in a car accident, that he might step up and be able to take advantage of that. But I kind of wanted, just because we've talked about him so much this year, we've talked about Daryl Richardson, and we mentioned it earlier in the show. He's hurt. I think Isaiah Pete is going to go in there and be able to not only get the start this week, secure that starting position, and I think he is going to provide a lot more upside than Daryl Richardson provided, and I think he's a person that you might be able to get pretty cheap if you're on the slide this week, but if you don't throw it this week, his value is going to go up pretty quick. So I would say go out and get Isaiah Pede for somebody that A, you can get points out of, or B, you might be able to package with somebody else for a trade if you don't have a stud tight end. There's a lot of stud tight ends out there. And if somehow you didn't get one, or you have one that's not producing, or you have Vernon Davis who was hurt, maybe you can put a package together for someone that has 2 stud tight ends and get one of them and get some production there.
Well, I'll tell you what, that is great fantasy advice, so much so that I have Daryl Richardson in the league, and I'm going after Isaiah Pede, and I'm in the league with you. So I hope you're not going after Isaiah Pede, because there's going to be a bidding war this weekend. I'm going to tell you what my sell high is. Normally I go buy lows. This weekend I'm taking a page out of the Jason book, and I'm going to go sell high. And I'm going to tell you to sell high on Santonio Holmes. Santonio Holmes had a ridiculous week. 5 catches, 154 yards, and a touchdown. And he actually blew the roof off his value. Now, they say he's coming back from an injury, and this is what we're about to see. And we should expect this from Santonio Holmes. Don't believe the hype, and I'm going to tell you why. He's got a rookie quarterback who's going to go through his ups and downs this season, and with him, he's going to take Santonio Holmes along for that roller coaster ride. Part 2 of why you shouldn't believe the hype is because if you look at the schedule over the next 7 weeks for the New York Giants, take a listen and read the screen, because there they are on this. They're at Tennessee, at Atlanta, at home against Pittsburgh, at home against New York, at Cincinnati, at home against New Orleans, and then they have a bye week. So out of the next 7 weeks, how many times would you start Santonio Holmes? I'm going to say once, maybe twice. Definitely against New Orleans, maybe against Pittsburgh. But if they get that run game going, then just against New Orleans, there's no reason to run out, spend all your free agency money on a guy that you're only going to start once in the next 7 weeks. It's just not worth it. And if you have him, get rid of him while the getting's good.
No, and I agree. I like to call this move something I call Scott Gearing, where you go out in free agency and you buy somebody, you get them, and then you instantly trade them. If you're going to go out and get Santonio Holmes this week, see if you can trade him before Sunday, because his value, I agree, falling off the map.
Let's move on to Roy's rant. We'll be back right after this rant.
Thanks, Rick and Jay. Sorry to be a little out of usual dress, but I'm actually on a family vacation out in Ohio. Unfortunately, I was able to take in the 49ers game on Sunday, which was a debacle on many levels, and as a 49ers fan, I'm embarrassed. As a fantasy analyst, I'm disappointed. Don't even get me started on the whole Colin Kaepernick thing. It's gone pretty poorly. Right now, my focus is on the actually only thing you would have started out of that game for the 49ers. The 49ers defense. Obviously, arguably a top 5 defense pre-draft, even after the week 1 and 2. This week against the Colts at home, they managed to get 0 turnovers and 1 sack. Just 1 sack. Gave up 27 points. In most standard leagues, they were worth a single point. That is horrible. Aldon Smith, who in the preseason quoted a goal of having 30 sacks this year. Apparently, when everybody was laughing at him, he maybe was a little inebriated that day and was actually referring to the fact that he wanted to drink a 30 rack every game. He looked like it with 5 tackles and no sacks and very little in the way of pressure. The only player that seemed to be playing hard was Patrick Willis, who got hurt, unfortunately, and Justin Smith, who's always a motor, and looks healthy finally. But with news breaking yesterday that Aldon Smith would be going to rehab and on absence from the team indefinitely, this defense took a huge hit. The secondary's been subpar to begin with, so turnovers were going to be an issue. But without Aldon Smith to generate sacks, I don't think this defense is even worthy of being started. Right now, at this point, I'd pick up most any other teams to start over them. I'm not saying drop them, but I'm saying you probably want to put them on your bench for the next few weeks until they get things figured out. Sadly, that's the best they can come with. Now, as a fan, I'd like to take this one moment of my rant to get disgusted with the team's performance. Talk about looking like some schleps that have bought into the hype a whole lot. Since the Packers game, they were ranked the #1 team after that game. They've looked about as bad as the Jacksonville Jaguars. Here's the big difference. Colin Kaepernick was supposed to be the new starting quarterback. No one to fight with in camp. A great 10-game palette last year to start with. This year, he's come out with nothing. Since that Packers game, he's looked lost. This week, he managed a whopping 127 yards passing at home against the Colts. That's an embarrassment. Of course, to be fair, Vernon Davis was hurt. May be hurt and missing this Thursday's game as well. That left only Anquan Bolden as his only reliable target out there. And we saw what happened. Nothing. This Thursday's game against the Rams is in St. Louis. I expect more of the same. That defense looked poor against Dallas last week, but I think the in-conference rivalry will pick them up a little bit. I'd actually start the Rams defense over the Niners defense this week. Disgusting. Just sad. Colin Kaepernick, you broke my heart.
Thank you, Paul Roy, for that rant. Jay, don't be that guy.
And I couldn't agree with Paul Roy more. A little disappointed in the 49ers' vaunted defense, the way they're looking. And I want to get on a little something. When I say don't be that guy, I mean don't be that guy that owns the San Francisco 49ers, because what happened this weekend, Aldon Smith gets pulled over for a DUI, crashes his car. He's got drugs in the car.
7 a.m. in the morning.
He's got pills in the car at 7 a.m. in the morning. And,
because all that's okay
right,
at midnight. That's totally fine at midnight. But at 7 a.m., you got a problem.
Right. And so nobody says anything. He's probably going to play. We're going to let the judicial system take us. They play a game because they got a big game. They just got embarrassed by Seattle. They got a big game. The Colts are coming to town. Lo and behold, the Colts embarrass them on their home field. And literally, before the 49ers have their locker room, Aldon Smith, he's going to be suspended by the 49ers, and then a day or two later, we're going to find out that, he's going to put himself into rehab or what have you. I think it was he should have been suspended the second they found out he crashed his car at 7 in the morning, was drunk, allegedly drunk, because you do that. I know I drive my car at 7 in the morning on a frequent basis because I have a job, but I don't crash into trees. So anyways, I just think it was terrible how we got a big game, we're going to let him play. Don't be that guy. Be better than that. Do not think it's okay for NFL players to play in that situation. Don't do it.
Absolutely. And if you're the NFL player in that situation, we've said this, Paul Roy has said this in a rant, you've got the money, call a car service. Don't get behind the wheel if you're inebriated. There's no excuse for it when you make that kind of dough.
But you know who made an excuse for it? The San Francisco 49ers CEO, Jed York, when he let him play in that game Sunday.
Yeah, no, I agree. And to some extent, the commissioner of football allowed it to happen too. So you guys are on notice from TFS. You better look out. Let's move on to Facebook. If you love the show and you can't believe what we've said, or if you are the CEO of the 49ers, or you are the commissioner of the NFL and you just want a little bit of evidence for court, go to Facebook, check us out. You can like us on Facebook at
That Football Show with those fantasy guys. Give us a like, give us a comment. We'll answer your comments on the air. Tell us if we were wrong. More often, we're right.
Speaking of Facebook, I got a Facebook question for you this week, my friend. The question is, guys, I need some help with my fantasy lineup. I'm in a 10-team PPR league. Part 1 is, should I go with Lamar Miller, Le'Veon Bell, or Daryl Richardson as my number 2 running back?
Well, at this point in time, for week 4,
right, That's what we're talking about.
Week 4, Lamar Miller is your answer.
Absolutely.
He is the established starter there. Le'Veon Bell has not set foot on the field for the Steelers.
Right.
I think moving forward, you're in a good position because you got options at your flex, and Le'Veon Bell might be the way to go. Week 5, 6, maybe after the bye week. I'm not sure when that is for the Steelers, but maybe that's when he hits his stride and is going at 100% of the offense, 100% of his ankle and foot injury. But right now, with the injury to Daryl Richardson,
Absolutely.
the uncertainty with Le'Veon Bell,
Yep.
I do not love Lamar Miller. I thought it was a joke where every single website, every single magazine, every single person I talked to said Lamar Miller is a sleeper. Well, if everybody thinks he's a sleeper, he's not a sleeper.
Right.
And guess what? He's producing like he is a sleeper.
Yeah,
so,
sure is.
but for this week,
In
the
this
answer is
scenario.
Lamar Miller.
Yeah, in this scenario, it has to be Lamar Miller. And by the way, this owner should also go out and pick up Isaiah Peed because he
No
owns
doubt.
Daryl Richardson.
Yep, no doubt.
Now, part 2 of the question, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Part 2 is, in my flex position, should I go with, are you ready? Because there's a long list here.
All right.
Roddy White, Stevie Johnson, Mike Williams, Martellus Bennett, Darius Moore, Andre Roberts. Those are the choices. What do you have to tell me?
Again, for week 4, the answer to this question is Denarius Moore. I think he had a little bit of a coming out party. I think Terrell Pryor had a little bit of a coming out party. I think everybody
Against
saw
a
it.
good defense.
Against a good, solid defense. They were able to produce and move the ball a little bit. You know, they had their moments where they didn't look too good, but Denarius Moore got open and made catches, produced some yards. I think that's the answer for week 4. If you don't have a lot of faith in Terrell Pryor, then, oh yeah, by the way, playing Washington's defense, who was giving up points all over the place,
Absolutely.
which even accentuates week 4 for Denarius Moore for that answer. But if you're not really confident in that, I think you can go with Mike Williams with the injury to Vincent Jackson. He's going to get more looks. Josh Freeman's always had faith in Mike Williams, so there's an option. Playing Arizona, Arizona's coming to Tampa, so that might be an option. But clearly moving forward, the guy you're going to want to watch is Roddy White,
Right.
because he has by far the most upside.
Right.
Week 4, he doesn't have the upside, but if that high ankle sprain, which tends to linger, stays with him, you stay with Denarius Moore or Mike Williams, depending on the matchup. But if Roddy White gets back to 90%, Roddy White's the answer. The
Yeah.
offense is too explosive.
Right. So, Eric, for week number 4, we're saying Lamar Miller is your number 2 running back and Denarius Moore is your flex position. Good luck, buddy. Now let's move on to Notre Dame.
And as Nostradamus has told you before, it is called Nostradamus. Now, let me go back to what happened last week. I think last week with the Eagles, I just want to set the table.
Yeah.
I think last week with the Eagles and Chiefs, I think I said that that the short week was going to be a problem. It was. I think I said the college coach might have some sort of brain cramp and make some ridiculous play calling mistake. And going for 2 in the second quarter of a 10-2 at the time 6 game, especially with that straight out of high school football formation, counts as a brain cramp. And then I think I called the score 24-17, and the final score was 26-16. So you heard it here.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. Notre Dame, which is how I say it now because it aggravates him. What do you have for us this week?
You're right, it does aggravate me. This week we have St. Louis hosting the San Francisco 49ers. San Francisco, after yet another frustrating loss. I think one loss was embarrassing. The second one was just frustrating. I think that we might have seen a couple of chinks in the armor, and I don't think there's any chance that San Francisco is catching Seattle in the division right now, especially when they're playing St. Louis, who was 4-1-1 in that very tough NFC West last year, and they were 1-0-1 against San Francisco, with both games going into overtime. I smell another unbelievably close game, and the score is going to be 20-17.
And week number 4 just might be Isaiah Peed's coming out party if Daryl Richardson's injured and he gets the start. Let's move on to Survivor Picks. You see him on the screen. Everybody won last week except for Jay, who's been eliminated. Paul Roy will take the Redskins over Oakland. I will take Baltimore over Buffalo. And Shane Brown, our director, is going to take the Detroit Lions over the Chicago Bears. An unbelievable pick.
That is an incredible pick. I mean, taking the Detroit Lions to win a game, not incredible. The way, did you see that play when Jay Cutler ran over that cornerback? I think that was the entire game changer for the Bears. I think they are on a major upswing and taking that game. Obviously, his fantasy team name is Stafford infection.
So I think he's wishful thinking, and he's hoping that there's a lot of points scored there by the Detroit Lions. We will find out next week. We will see you next week. Thank you for joining us. This is That Football Show with those fantasy guys.
And we are those fantasy guys.
See you next week, everybody.